Hi, I'm Vince and welcome to my Vince Unlimited channel. In this video I shall be considering the definition of a first car, telling you about the first cars I owned and drove, and about my Hillman Avenger, which is not quite as good as I thought it to be, then decayed before my very eyes. How do you define your first car? The question can actually be read in many different ways. Let me explain. Take a look at the photograph here. You're seeing a very young me sat in black and white next to my mother on our front doorstep. In my hands you'll see a small toy, a 50s style car, the make and model of which I cannot recall, nor determine from the picture. I don't remember that car, but by the look of my tight grip, it looks very much like this is mine. Is this my first car? The first toy car that I definitely remember owning, and which became my favourite one, was this Volkswagen Carmen Gear corgi toy. It was known simply as Red Car, and by the end of my enthusiastic playing with it, it became more like this. So was this for my first car? But toy cars don't count as a first car, do they? One needs to be able to get in and drive. Well, I could do that in the go-kart that my brother and I were given. I've only been around 4 or 5 years old when first given it, but in the ensuing years it was me doing the driving, providing all the self-propelled forward motion, steering and braking. In doing so I learnt width judgment, the consequences of speed, under and oversteer, and when ignoring all the above, what happens when the corner is tighter than the grip. So surely my first car. Then motorised transport came into my life. You can hear about the origins of this journey in my various bike videos, because like many others in those days, I started on 2 wheels. On the road since my 16th birthday on a borrowed moped, then at 17 my own trail bike, followed by a small road bike, then a mid-sized tourer. You also have noted that I finished this section of my life with a crash, a girlfriend, thoughts of future passengers, and a story involving a bicycle and a Hillman Avenger. My first actual car. Or was it? It was certainly not the first I drove, as I'd been driving for about 3 years by then. I started as soon as I was legally allowed at 17. The first motorised car I got behind the wheel of was a Vauxhall Viva. Not the latest rebadged 2016 Chevrolet Spark, but the much earlier HC version that Vauxhall produced during the 1970s. It was red and new and light to drive through its enormous steering wheel. I'd already garnered a good sense of roadcraft from my year on mopeds and a 333 on my Yamaha trail bike. And crucially, I couldn't fault outfit. Driving a car should have been so easy. The trouble was that it was owned by a gross, unsympathetic, interfering driver instructor, and I couldn't afford many or even regular lessons. I hated every moment of the driving, not because of the car, but because of the instructor. He would arrive late, squished down in the passenger seat with his plump thighs overhanging both sides of the wide seat, usually with his used handkerchief dripping out of his side pocket hanging over the handbrake. He would then fuss and panic about someone driving his car and constantly grab at the steering wheel and gear stick, then pump his feet up and down on his new device, his dual pedal setup. I already knew how to meander through traffic from my year and some of biking. I was aware of my surroundings, familiar with junctions and traffic signs. I just needed some practice at the bits of a car that were different, such as clutch changing using my foot and cornering using a big circular wheel. But I was not free to plot my own course without unnecessary intervention, or pull to a gentle stop without my passenger stabbing the brakes in panic. I was just 17 and didn't have the life experiences or confidence to change instructors or the funds to do back-to-back lessons. And as a result, every 2 months it felt like another brand new start. Just let go of the controls, you gross pig-headed bastard. Overall, I had just 6 lessons. One every month or so during the year before I was advised by Mr. Slob to take my driving test, and inevitably failed it. I can't remember exactly why, but I do recall it was only a couple of minor issues. The main thing I needed was regular, unhindered practice. I was also under pressure from my work. My job required me to visit various construction sites around the local counties, and my white-collar image was being smeared by my arrival in motorbike clothing and a helmet. Plus, I was unable to transport the required oddments and official documents that my role dictated. The boss wanted me driving, and I had colleagues' cars awaiting my piloting. I finally got my chance when my mother persuaded my dad that I could be added onto her car's insurance. With the assistance of my older brother in the passenger seat and a couple of L plates, I could get all the practice I needed. It was a first generation white Triumph Herald 1200 with bright red seats, and I took it out as often as money, my brother and time allowed. I even took my friends Jeff and Spike in the back a couple of times, although regretted it when they gesticulated at a passing police car, which got me a roadside lecture about how I, as the driver, should be in control of my unruly passengers. But it did the job. I got the regular practice needed and then rehired the Viva to pass my car driving test on 6th of August 1980. Not that I swapped my exciting twin-wheeled vehicles for a car immediately. Why should I? I already had 120 mile/hour travel potential and a 0 to 60 time of around 3.5 seconds. Cars were dull, slow things that in my budget were rusty and unreliable with excessive insurance premiums. Beside that, I'd started driving anyway, virtually every day, in nearly new cars, freely fuelled by a large on-site petrol tank. I worked in a small to mid-sized building services company. Our task was to design and build the intricate pipework and associated plan that courses its way around commercial and industrial buildings. And my role was to manage or assist in the supervision of these projects. The company needed me to deliver tender offers, visit the sites for meetings, and help with previously forgotten small deliveries, and so lent me the company cars for this purpose. I particularly took advantage of tearing around the place in John's blue facelift model Vauxhall Chevette 1.3L, as he was generous enough to let me have the keys. Thanks, John, really appreciated. Malcolm, the other engineer, was less forthcoming with his near identical green model. In fact, I was more often offered the mid-size executive Vauxhall Cavalier Mark 1 1.6 LS of senior engineer Jeffrey, which I didn't like so much as the more compact and fun Chevettes. And once I had to deliver our MD Peter's BMW 525 E12 post-facelift model to Salisbury. That drove well. I saw 125 mile on the speedo. It was just under the 130 mile on the dial officer. However, time was moving on. I had done all that I needed at that moment on two wheels, and as explained in my Honda CX500 video, the market for potential new female friends would be increased exponentially by having my own four wheels. So I advertised my bike for sale, included a thought that I would consider a swap for a car. I had a reply. Some chap had a car and wanted a bike. We agreed that any difference in value would be included in cash, and he duly arrived in his Hillman. I can't recall who got some dosh with their vehicle, but he took away my shiny as new, apart from the frame reshaped bike, and left me the keys to his slightly tatty Avenger. I had received not only the keys, but also the car. A silvery blue Hillman Avenger GLS with black vinyl roof. This pleased me immensely, as for a start it exceeded the company cars I had use of in virtually every aspect. It was a GLS model, not a mere engineer's L or senior guy's LS, as anyone around this time knew. This was important. It had 4, not 2 headlamps, velour as opposed to plastic seats, row-style wheels, and its upmarket vinyl roof, plus an enormous 1.6 engine as big as Jeff's one. It also had some extras not normally on these models. A bit of surface rust and a distinct lean towards the front right-hand side. But let's not forget, it was a GLS and sported a rev counter. Driving the car felt good. Its soft, probably knackered suspension wallowed it around to suit its big, comfortable presence. There was a dashboard full of dials and accommodation to easily fit 5 adults. The multi-headlamp setup lit up the darkest of night lanes, and the powerful engine provided prompt passage to wherever you chose to travel. Everything worked, and I was a happy owner that summer. I loved having the car and was the first of my gang to have one. Yes, Spike had occasional use of a huge 4-wheel barge that had Vauxhall VX490 written on the back. It was an FD series and actually his dad's car. All the others were still tooting around on just 2 wheels. I became the go-to guy for transporting numbers greater than 2. In fairness, the others didn't have cars because they were still at school, or 6th form college as they put it. I was the only one working with a wage, although a fairly meagre one, as I was doing an office-based apprenticeship. But at least I could run the thing. Sort of. The most memorable of journeys happened at the beginning of August that year. My good mate Jeff had been dating Jackie for a few years by now, and a suggestion was made that I could get together with Jackie's friend Teresa. A plan was hatched for us all to go to the British Biking Grand Prix together, ostensibly to help with the marshalling, but mainly to snuggle up in handy pairs in a tiny overnight tent. Jeff had just been signed up for his Polytechnic university course and was already there sorting out his new accommodation, so I was tasked with collecting the girls, passing by the big school to pick him up, and then for all four of us to travel towards Silverstone. The problem was it was Freshers' Week, so Jeff was torn between his long planned trip to the races and getting in on all the first social events with all his new poly buddies. He felt he had no choice but to choose his new social contacts, meaning that I had to take a very tearful girlfriend and her sympathetic bestie onwards to the racing circuit, where the only racing certainty was that the threesome in the tent would end up as a sad sob fest. Our weekend duties were also squarely curtailed. Without Jeff, we could hardly form a reliable marshalling team for a major Grand Prix event, so we were asked to assist around the site and the pits area, a euphemism for don't get in anyone's way. We didn't have much to do and sat around watching things happen. At one point I had popped to the loo and Barry Sheen was told off by the girls for sitting in Vince's seat in his Yamaha pit area. But I should be reporting on the car. Well, it was near perfect, plenty big enough for 3 adults and all the camping equipment that we could muster, and very quiet and comfortable on the long trip. The only issue being that the windscreen wipers had decided to stop working just as the rain started to. Oh, and the fact that Jackie threw open the passenger door too hard when the car was parked in a grass field facing downhill, resulting in a slightly bent front door where it met the hinge and a bit of a gap where it now couldn't meet the back door. A judicious slam and a bit of securing rope and it was closed, providing access wasn't needed anymore on that side of the car. It wasn't quite the end of the car. A hammer soon sorted that out. The end happened later that year as autumn, winter and my circumstances started to take its toll. The ownership coincided with a dramatic time of my life. I decided I had made an error in joining a company in the construction industry. I wasn't planning to stay beyond my apprenticeship, so immediately junked the job. It was the week before national news headlines first reported that unemployment had reached the milestone of 1 million. I was out of work, likely to be saying that way, poor, and had only just left home to stay in a shared house with some of my old school buddies. The car was parked unused at my parents' house, and when the tax ran out, I popped it up on the front lawn. Not as dramatic as it might seem at first, because the lawn had become a regular spot for many of my brother's broken down vehicles. However, my car wasn't welcomed. Possibly in fairness, because unlike my brother, I wasn't living there anymore. I was asked to move it. As usual, it fired up first time, but then immediately became sick and started to wet itself all over the lawn. That day, I learnt 3 important things. Firstly, why antifreeze is a critical component in a coolant system. Secondly, that you cannot trust a previous owner to know about the first thing. And thirdly, if you are oblivious to points 1 and 2, the ordinarily very durable metal crankcase can be split in 2. I had no funds to repair the car and I had to come up with a solution. Looked like I found one in my new friend Stuart. He offered to take the car off my hands and give me a bicycle. This pleased me because I had never had a bike. I could actually afford to run one. And there was more talk of a cash value to make up the difference. And I desperately needed cash at that point in my life, on the simple grounds that I had precisely none of it. Sadly, the deal didn't go down well. Newly discovered ex-friend Stuart arranged to take the car promptly, then procrastinated about the bike. It appeared he didn't have one to give me, or didn't want to part with any he did have, and spoke about building one for me. I had previously envisaged a shiny, brand new racing bike, but was now looking down the barrel of a rusty frame fished from a canal, bent spokes and a soggy seat. The bike, when it was finally delivered, wasn't that much better. It was a recycled frame with a lovely hand-crafted paint job with a unique paint run effect. None of the components were of any quality or purchased recently from a store. And when the cash differential was raised, Stuart disappeared and so became someone I never saw again. Shame really, seemed like quite a nice guy. So, in summary, I'd started with a fairly new motorcycle and ended up with a crappy bicycle. But in between, loads of fond memories of my first car, because that's what it was. And that's how it should be, because anyone knows, The first car is the cheapest. Cue the song, Rod. Well, I hope you enjoyed my tale and thanks so much for staying to the end. Reward yourself with a subscription to my channel so you can enjoy more thoughts on my subsequent cars. In fact, why not add a like to this video as well? And click on the notification button to be automatically advised when I next post something. Such small actions will be greatly appreciated. Meanwhile, drive, ride or cycle safely. Bye.